This is Jewish Prepper 1. We're going to be continuing the series from the LDS Preparedness Manual, Surviving in the City. Number 4. The failure of the power grid. Nothing is as suddenly obvious, nor has such a gigantic psychological impact as the failure of the power grid. When the electricity stops, almost everybody knows it at the same instant, unless of course it happens in the middle of the night. Naturally, during the first few hours of the power failure, if it occurs, people will assume it's a temporary situation. Maybe a tree fell on some power lines, or perhaps a transformer blew up somewhere nearby. They'll sit tight and they'll wait for the power to come back on. Well, what if it doesn't? Then the city faces a severe problem. Without power, obviously, everything shuts down. Within hours, the looting begins in the more crime-ridden cities. We saw this in New York a few decades ago. The longer the power stays off, the worse the social disorder. The loss of power will bring the entire city to a halt, while vehicles may get around for a few more days, using whatever fuel they have left. Businesses obviously won't be operating. Houses that depend on electricity for heat will quickly reach winter temperatures, freezing many occupants to death, while those that depend on electricity for air conditioning will just as quickly reach summer temperatures, resulting in death from heat stroke. Hospitals and police stations may have generators on hand with a few days' worth of fuel, but in short order, that will be depleted too. But the water treatment plant will almost certainly be offline without power, causing all the events mentioned in the water section above. Let's face it, the power is the worst thing to be without in the city. If you have power, you can survive a food shortage, perhaps even a short water shortage. But without power, all bets are off. If you have a bug-out vehicle stocked and ready to go, we'll talk about that soon, this might be the time to bail. 5. Quarantine, martial law, or a city has been sealed off. A new threat that manifests itself in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina is the possibility that the government will quarantine or seal off the exits of the city to keep all of the residents contained within its boundaries so as not to allow them to flee or to leave. This could be done for purely noble reasons, like controlling an outbreak of disease or plague from spreading to nearby communities, or for more diabolical reasons, like exerting control over population centers by stopping the free movement of people. If you lived in New Orleans, the only time you could leave was before or during the hurricane. Afterwards, you were trapped and could only leave when and where you were permitted. Countless people tried to walk out of the city and were turned back at gunpoint by the National Guard, only to be sent back into the hellhole until they could be out-processed and evacuated. Regardless of why, the issue is that, should you choose to remain in the city, you may have the option of leaving once the disaster response begins. Now to solutions in the city. Okay, you're stuck in the city. You've made the decision to stay. You've read the problems above, you believe they make sense, and you're intelligently frightened. What now? You really have two strategies. You can A, stay and defend your home, or B, bug out. Leave the city and head for the hills. Important. This is not an either-or situation. You can begin by staying in your house and assessing the situation. You'll want to have a bug-out vehicle stocked and ready just in case, if you can afford one, but you may never actually choose to bug out. You'll have to be the ultimate judge of this. Just remember that when you bug out, you face major risks and disadvantages. Among them, 1. You're severely limited in how much you can carry. 2. You have limited range due to fuel. 3. You expose yourself to social chaos, roadblocks, random violence, etc. 4. Your house will certainly be looted while you're gone. And 5. You run the risk of mechanical breakdowns of your vehicle. And finally, 6. You must have a place to go that you know is in better shape than the one that you're currently in. In general, unless you have a specific known safe place as your final destination, I don't advise people to bug out. Just heading for the hills is a very poor plan. You might not make it. But heading for grandma's house or some known safe place could be a very good plan indeed, depending on whether grandma is ready, willing, and able to accept you, of course. For these reasons and more, staying and defending your house is sometimes the only reasonable course of action, even if it seems dangerous. For the most part, looters and people looking for food are going to have plenty of easy victims. So if you show a little willingness to use force to defend your property, you'll likely send people on to the next house. That is, until the next house is already empty and you appear to be the last house on the block with any food and water left. If you're in a bad enough area, your neighbors may gang up on you and demand your supplies or your life. This is truly a worst-case scenario. And unless you literally have a house full of battle rifles and people trained to use them and the willingness to shoot your neighbors, you're sunk. This is why the best situation by far is to keep your neighbors informed and help them get prepared. Then you can act as a group defending your neighborhood and sharing the supplies you have with anyone willing to help you defend. And don't think for a second that your non-member neighbors won't remember all that food storage in your garage. When you have this kind of situation going, your neighbors realize that you are their lifeline. You supply them with food and water. They will help support you because they are, in effect, supporting their own lives. The best situation is when your neighbors have their own food and water supplies. That way, they aren't depleting yours, and they have a strong motivation for getting together with you to defend your neighborhood. We're going to continue more on this in the next video. This is Jewish Prepper.